Hi all. So I know I haven't addressed the NewJeans situation in a minute now, but there's been a material update that is actually extremely disturbing to me and potentially a irreversible life-altering update for one of the members, Danielle. So what actually has happened is that ADOR has unilaterally terminated Danielle's contract and Danielle alone out of all the 5 members. This is important because it signals a material shift in tone of ADOR from the situation from what they were previously. Previously, it very much seemed like they were fighting to get the girls to come back, and they presented themselves, at least to the court, as wanting to amicably and in good faith restore NewJeans, get them back in their contract, and go on to make music and do whatever it is they want to do. As a brief recap, NewJeans entered into a litigation with Hive/ADOR, basically wanting to terminate their contracts. But essentially, after a long court battle, the court upheld that their contracts were actually valid and they could not exit their contracts. They did not have grounds for termination, okay? After that happened, the 2 youngest members, pictured here, Hyen and Heron, said that they were going to return to NewJeans, kind of separately from the 3 older members, Hani, Minji, and Danielle, okay? And so Hyen and Heron returned to ADOR, and ADOR made a statement basically saying, okay, they're back and we're excited to work with them or whatever. But it did not include the other 3 members. The other 3 members made a statement on their own, basically saying, I don't know, we're returning too, and I don't know why they didn't announce us. And it was really weird and contentious and kind of childish. I did not bother to offer an update on that because I just was like, these girls are not thinking with their non-existent frontal lobes. You know what I mean? Essentially, what ADOR had said was that they were in individual talks with all 3 of the members, Hani, Minji, and Danielle, and were basically trying to come to a mutual agreement about how to best proceed. Well, it seems like for one of these members, them talks did not go well at all. So what's happened here? ADOR has unilaterally terminated Danielle's contract and Danielle alone out of all the 5 members. And they've also filed a lawsuit for 43 billion Korean won, which is about $30 million in USD for damages. And the lawsuit also names Danielle's mother and Min Jin as co-defendants, basically alleging that they materially contributed to contract breaches and delays of the group being able to get back together. It's basically a career-ending, financially annihilating legal action. And this is a pretty serious situation, right? When the 2 younger members, Hyen and Heron, said that they were going to go back, ADOR quietly reintegrated them. But then when it comes to Danielle, she's being singled out in a choice that to me actually feels pretty strategic. She's one of 2 non-Korean members. She's mixed race, she's Australian, and she's basically an easier target, especially in a culture where there's a big in-group, out-group kind of cultural structure. It really functions to me as an example-making exercise and basically a deterrent, using her as a deterrent for any K-pop idol in the industry, whoever dares to go against their company. And it also really effectively works as a scare tactic for whatever negotiations are going on with no longer Hani, because Hani's already gotten back in with ADOR, but with Minji. Basically, it's this is what can happen to you if you don't bend the knee. You know what I mean? It's scary. The other thing that's terrifying about this lawsuit is that under Korean law, these debts, especially if she's found guilty of intentional breach of contract, those debts are non-dischargeable through bankruptcy. And because she's an entertainer, they're seen as a business. So it means that the wages can be brandished by the government to pay this debt, to a certain level where she's basically going to be living in poverty, more or less. Then on top of it, there's some rumors that maybe she would go to the black label or something like that. But, this lawsuit also makes her totally radioactive to any other K-pop labels, you know what I mean, or other potential partners. It's basically they're really making an example of her and basically setting a standard for the industry that basically sends a very clear message. If you go against any of these corporations, you can have your entire life destroyed. And what I find the most striking right now is actually the public reaction of like Korean netizens, okay? Like if this happened in the United States, it would probably trigger like a major public backlash, but in Korea, there's been a different response. A lot of the public is very much against NewJeans. They see them as like spoiled, entitled brats who are doing this thing because of Min Hee-jin and that they themselves are like bad people. They don't see them as young girls who could have been misled and who made a mistake and who may have made bad choices or whatever, but who don't deserve to be like destroyed and have their lives crushed under the weight of a massive corporation. They see them as brats, like spoiled girls who are getting what they deserve. And that is really kind of scary because the one thing that could help in this situation would be public pressure, but the public pressure is not on her side. And so what exactly happened here, right? So there are rumors that suggest that Danielle engaged in solo brand activities like this Omega watch thing, and I guess a snack commercial in like South Asia or something. And also that her mom played like an undue influence in influencing other members. I think it was specifically like Minji who was mentioned. This is all just rumors and speculation. We do not know if any of that stuff that I just said is actually fact. It's just stuff that's running around the internet. But in any case, what's clear is that blame is being redistributed downward to one of the members. And it's a pretty classic divide and conquer strategy. And Danielle ends up being kind of a symbol. She, I think, is probably a young, naive, probably arrogant in the way that youth often is, where she probably had this false sense of invincibility. But she clearly overestimated her leverage and misunderstood the gravity of the power structures around her. And it basically walked into a situation where she can be basically totally decimated, which is terrifying. And I don't think that makes her a villain. I think that makes her a young person who walked into adult consequences without adult protection. It's a disproportionate retribution in my mind. It's actually really, really chilling, and everybody should be afraid of this. And I think for the K-pop industry in general, this effectively serves as a warning shot, right? When the Luna thing happened, it kind of set this standard that like K-pop idols can be seen as autonomous and potentially when they're being mistreated, actually like win in court. I feel like this thing with NewJeans undoes all of that. Basically, what it basically sends a message as is that idol autonomy is totally conditional and dissent will be absolutely quashed with overwhelming force. And basically, it really means that becoming a K-pop idol more and more makes it clear that it requires you to surrender your personhood, your leverage, and your exit options entirely. Basically, people should not be cheering this outcome. Like, it has very sinister implications for other artists, you know? And of recent, Hybe actually signed Tyla. And while initially I might have thought, you know, maybe that they'd be able to do stuff with her career and basically expand her into global markets because her time in the US market hasn't really gone the way that she's wanted. Now I'm kind of afraid for her, right? It feels very unsettling because if this is how Hybe handles dissent internally, I feel like the risks and the implications of the risks extend far beyond NewJeans. Basically, it reframes Hybe less just as like a talent incubator and a powerful company, and probably the most powerful company in K-pop, but also a ruthless enforcer of consequences if you decide to dissent. And that's scary. Anyway, in conclusion, this outcome does not feel like justice to me. It feels like making an example of somebody. It's giving like medieval times when, you know, somebody would go against the king or whatever, and they would like leave their like, you know, severed head on like a spike or something like that. I mean, obviously that's very hyperbolic, but like she is now going to be a symbol of what happens when you dissent against the system, you know? And that feels really sinister in my book. I think that Danielle gravely miscalculated and probably overplayed her hand in a negotiation, but this response is designed to basically destroy her, not to correct her. It's designed to make an example out of her, you know, and that should chill everybody. That should scare everybody. Because it's not about whether or not these girls were right in the battle with ADOR, or, you know, whether or not they were manipulated by Min Hee-jin and all that. It's about idols being made an example of for asserting their independence. And I don't think this is just a NewJeans story. I think that this has implications to the whole K-pop industry. And I think that everybody should be a little bit scared about who holds power and how they're willing to use it. And that's all I got to say about this. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.